For 3 years, the envelope with my salary weighed exactly the same. In March, it was heavier. I waited until my wife left for work, and then I went into her notebook. What I found on one page put me on the kitchen floor. I'm Sam. She's Yuki. I'm American. She's Japanese. And for 3 years, I have been losing arguments in a house where nobody raises their voice. Everybody warned me about the culture, the shoes, the bowing, the trains. Nobody warned me about the marriage. I did not marry a country. I married one specific woman who is calmer than me, better organized than me, and this is the part that ruins me, usually right. So the envelope. On the first day of every month, my wife hands me one. My salary. It lands, she takes it, she pays everything, and what is inside that envelope is what I get to spend until the 31st. Not because I lost a bet, because in this house, the person who is better with money runs the money, and it has never once been me. It starts on a Tuesday, in a kitchen, with me shouting at a woman who would not give me a single word back. Here's how a fight works in my family in Ohio. Somebody says a true thing too loudly. Somebody else says a truer thing louder. 20 minutes later, there is pie. That is the whole system. And I brought it to Tokyo and aimed it at my wife. I said something about her hours. She said nothing. So I said it again, better, with more of my hands. She stood up, took the cups off the table and washed them. And I understood with total clarity that I could keep going for an hour and the only thing in that room that would change was the dishes. I asked her why she will not just fight. She said, if I say it now, I can't take it back. I said that is the point. That is what honesty is. And she looked at me genuinely puzzled and said, why would I want to say a thing I can't take back? There is a word here, mahai. Roughly, hold it, carry it, and do not put it down in front of people. I used to think that was repression. It is a bank account. Everybody in this country has one, and I was born overdrawn. The problem is, what happens next? 4 days of a home that runs perfectly, meals made, laundry folded, shirts hanging up, with a person inside it who has gone somewhere I cannot reach. She was not punishing me. That took a year to understand. She was waiting for the thing to stop being sharp. What I was living in was a very clean apartment with a ghost. On the 4th night, I said, I would rather you screamed at me. And she said the sentence that took the argument off me and put it inside me. She said, you want me to be angry so you can stop feeling bad. I did not have an answer. I still don't. What I did instead was go looking for something I could win, and I picked the one thing in that apartment with my name on it, the envelope. Let me explain the envelope properly, because when I say it out loud in America, the room goes quiet like I have confessed to something. In a lot of Japanese households, the wife runs the money. The salary lands, she takes it, she pays everything, and the husband gets koikzukai, pocket money. There is a national average for it. Men compare theirs the way we compare rent. She did not announce mine. She did the arithmetic one evening, and the next month there was an envelope, and it was thinner than I expected, and somewhere inside me a small American man began screaming about liberty. So we had it out. I said, it is my salary. She said, it is our salary. I said, then why do I get an envelope and you don't? And she said, flat, no heat, the way you would read out a train time, because you buy a coffee like a man with no memory. And here is where I lose half of you. Every couple I know back home splits the bills down the middle and calls it equality. It is not equality. It is two adults keeping receipts on each other, because neither trusts the other with the whole thing. My wife has the whole thing, and I have never once wanted to hide a purchase from her. Decide which marriage is the safe one. I kept pushing. I wanted a number, a share, something with my name on it. And she put the pen down and said, "You don't want the money. You want to be asked." Which was true, and which I had not known about myself until a woman I met at 31 said it to me in her second language on a Wednesday. So I let it go. I took my envelope like a man receiving a diagnosis, and I decided the money was settled. It was not settled. That notebook had a page in it I would not see for 2 more years. And when I did, I sat down on the kitchen floor. But first, Sunday. Her mother. Lunch. That Sunday, she asked me, very warmly, whether American men also help in the kitchen. That is the whole sentence. And in the car afterwards, I said to Yuki, "Your mother thinks I am useless." And Yuki said, "She didn't say anything." And I said, "She said everything." And Yuki said, "Then you understood her." So what is the problem? What I actually wanted was for my wife to take my side against her mother. Out loud. In Japanese. Preferably at the table. And she would not do it, not once, and for a long time I filed that under. She is afraid of her mother. That was wrong. And it is the least generous thing I have ever thought about her. And the whole time I sat there being noble about it, my envelope was in my back pocket. She had packed it that morning. Before any of this. The way she does every month. Because a year later, her cousin told me, assuming I knew, that when Yuki announced she was marrying an American, there had been a conversation. 1. Yuki went to her mother's apartment and came back at midnight, and nobody in that family has said a word against me since. I asked her about it. She said, "I already had that fight. 6 years ago. You weren't there." And I had been sulking in a car because she would not do it again for an audience of 1. 3 weeks later, I came home to a vacuum cleaner standing in the hallway like a summons. I am not a dirty man. I want that on the record. I am a man who puts a thing down and thinks about it later. In a small Tokyo apartment, later does not exist. There is no later. There is only the surface, and whether the thing is on it. So I finally said it. You never actually ask me. You do it yourself, then you are tired, and then I am the problem. She said, "I asked you 4 times. I said, "No, you didn't." She said, "Not with words." And I said, "The one time in 3 years I scored a point, that is not asking. That is a test I am failing in a language you never taught me." And she thought about it. For 6 seconds, which from her is a public hearing. And she said, "Okay, that one is mine." That is the whole concession. No apology, no speech. But the next week she asked me, out loud, with the actual words, to take the bags down, and I have never been happier to carry garbage down 4 flights of stairs. Which was the last argument I ever finished, because after that she found the move that ends them in 3 seconds, and she used it on me for 2 years. Here is the move that beat me for 2 straight years, and I need you to feel how unfair it is. We are arguing. I am building something. I have a structure, I have examples, I have a conclusion I am proud of. And somewhere around minute 3, she says, "Gomen na essa." I am sorry. And the argument is over. Not paused, over. And I would say, "Don't apologize, engage with what I said." And she would say, "I said sorry, it's finished." And I would say, "It is not finished, we have not solved it." And she would already be standing up, because in her world it ended the second somebody took responsibility, and what I call solving it, she calls 2 people hurting each other for entertainment. And I will say the thing my own country will hate me for. Talking it out is not communication. Most of what we call communication is one person making their discomfort into somebody else's problem, out loud, for as long as they feel like it. I did that to my wife for 2 years and called it being open. She apologized, made dinner, and let me keep believing it. And the dinner she saved that evening with was bought out of her own envelope, which I would have known if I had ever once looked. I tried her move on her once. I apologized early to end an argument. She looked at me and said, "That's not yours." She was right. It fit me like a borrowed suit. Then one night she explained it. She said, "You want to keep the argument. I want to keep the evening." That is the whole difference. I was treating every disagreement as a case to be won before bed. She was treating the evening as the thing worth saving. And then her family had a dinner, and I sat there 4 hours understanding nothing anybody said, including my wife. My Japanese is fine. Fine means I can order food, apologize, and survive a hardware store. At a family dinner with 6 people and 40 years of history, fine means nothing. I sit there wearing a pleasant face, producing small, agreeable noises at what I sincerely hope are the correct moments. There is a phrase here, kuki o yoh mu. Read the air. The message is in the room, not in the sentence, and everybody at that table is reading a document I cannot see. I once agreed to help somebody move house. I still don't know whose house it was. I went, I moved it. In the taxi home, I said, "You did not translate one thing for me tonight. Not one. 2 hours." And she said, "Because you stopped listening when I translate. You wait for me instead of watching them." And that landed, because it was true. For an entire year, my ears did not work in that country. They had been outsourced to my wife. And then she said the part I had not thought about once in 3 years. She said, "When you are at that table, I am working. I listen twice. I answer twice. For 1 hour, I would like to be at dinner." My wife had not been to a family dinner since I arrived. She had been to 28 interpreting jobs, unpaid, seated beside a man who thought he was being included. So we made a rule, and it is the best rule in this marriage. At her family's table, she translates nothing. I sink or I swim. And afterwards, walking to the station, she tells me one thing I missed. One. It is always the only one that mattered. And then my company offered me Osaka, and I did something I still cannot say without wincing. The offer was good. Bigger role, more money, one condition, Osaka in 11 weeks. My department head asked me in a corridor, more money. I thought about the envelope the whole way down that corridor, about it finally being thick, about handing her a bigger one for once. And I said yes. In the corridor, because that is decisive. That is a man taking care of his family. That is what you do. I told Yuki that evening like I was bringing home a prize. She has a job. I need to say that clearly, because for about 4 days, I did not. Small clinic, 9 years. She is the person the other people there go to. Her commute is 11 minutes, and she has told me more than once that those 11 minutes are the reason she is a functioning human being. And she listened to the whole announcement, the salary, the timeline, the apartment we could afford. And then she said, very quietly, "You decided in one room and told me in another." Then she went to bed. And the silence that started that night was not the 4-day kind. It ran 11 days. And by day 6, she was sleeping on her side of the futon, like a person on a train. I did not spend those 11 days repenting. I built a case. I made a list of reasons. I rehearsed it in the shower. And on the 11th night, I stood in that kitchen at 1 a.m, with the argument loaded. And what came out was, I was wrong. I made a decision about your life in a corridor and called it looking after you. And she did not say it is okay. She is not in the forgiveness business, my wife. She said, "Then say it. Not to the wall, to me." So I said it again to her face, which was significantly harder, and she nodded once. And then she said, "Now sit down. We look at it together." And she went and got the notebook. We turned it down. Together, in 40 minutes, with numbers I could have had on day one for free. And here is the part that gets me. She was not against Osaka. She would have gone. What she would not accept was hearing about her own life secondhand. 3 weeks later, we flew to Ohio, to my family, for 9 days. And on the third day, my aunt opened her mouth. My family met her at the airport and started shouting at her in the friendliest possible way, which is our version of a hug. She has a face she keeps for these occasions. Day 2, she wanted to leave early. I said, "We can't, they'll be hurt." She said, "They will be fine, you will be hurt." Which was correct. I made her stay anyway, and that is the meanest small thing I did that year. And then my wife did something I have to report honestly, because it is the only time I have ever had her cold. She said okay. She stayed. And she spent the entire evening being perfect and absent, polite, helpful, carrying plates, and gone. The exact thing she does to me at home. The thing I had complained about for 3 years, in a kitchen at volume. She agreed out loud and then charged me for it in silence. On the porch afterwards I said it. "You're doing it to me, right now, in my mother's house." She looked at the street for about 4 seconds, and then she said, "Yes." That is the only argument in this marriage where she was the one who had to sit down. And on day 3, at dinner, my aunt said, cheerfully to the table, about my wife, in front of my wife, "Is she always this quiet? Sam, does she ever have an opinion?" And my whole family laughed, not cruelly. That is the thing about it. Not one person in that room meant a single bad second of it. I did the thing I had spent 3 years calling repression and cowardice and not real communication. I said nothing. I put my fork down and let the silence sit on that table, and I did not fill it, and I did not rescue anybody, and a room full of extremely loud Americans discovered that they could hear themselves. It took 9 seconds. My aunt apologized to Yuki before I said a word. In the car, she said 4 words. That was very good. And here is what I brought home from Ohio. My family says I love you every time anybody leaves a room, and none of them could tell you what my brother is afraid of. Her family has never said it once, and would notice the week he stopped eating. One is a habit. The other is attention. We picked the loud one and called it warmth. 2 months later, she handed me the envelope, and it was the wrong weight. The envelope was thick, noticeably thick, and my first thought was not gratitude, it was suspicion, because in 3 years that envelope has never once surprised me. So I did what any grown man would do. I said thank you, waited until she left for work, and went through the household notebook like a detective. The notebook is a kakebo, a household ledger. Millions of homes here keep one every yen in, every yen out, by hand, by category, at the kitchen table. Hers goes back 9 years, 4 books, and I had never opened one, because I had decided the entire system was a thing being done to me. There is a line every month that is not a bill. It goes to her mother. It has gone there since her father died, and it has never once come out of my envelope. It comes out of hers. My wife has run her own allowance down to almost nothing for 3 years, so that I would never have to be asked, and she would never have to hear me hesitate. And then, the page from year 1, when I was earning almost nothing, and quietly sending money home for my father's bills. Quietly, because I did not want to be the man who came to Japan and cost people money. It is in there every month, in her handwriting, from before I told her. She knew by the 2nd month and built the whole system around a secret she had decided to let me keep. She came home at 6. I was still on the floor. I said, "Why is the envelope thick?" She said, "Your father's last bill was paid in January. I know because you stopped checking your phone on Fridays." And I said the only honest thing I had. You should have told me. She said, "I didn't want you to feel small in your own house." And I said, "The argument I finally won, that is my decision. You don't get to protect me from my own life. It is exactly what I did to you about Osaka." She stood there a long time. Then she put her bag down, sat on the floor next to me, still in her coat, and said, "Then you do it." And she handed me the pen. Not the money, she is not insane. The pen. 1 month my handwriting in her book. It took me 9 days to lose a receipt and 40 minutes to have a full argument with myself about a coffee. There are 2 envelopes on that table now. On the first of the month she does hers, I do mine. We swap. And we each read the other one's month like a very boring letter. She still runs the money. I would not take that job at gunpoint. But there is nothing in that notebook anymore that only one of us knows. I do not chase arguments to the end of the night anymore. She was right. I wanted to win the fight. She wanted to keep the evening. And the evening is the better prize. And she brings me the hard things first now, before she has quietly solved them alone. That is the trade. It cost 3 years, 1 job offer, and a notebook I had no business opening. My aunt in Ohio still asks whether Yuki ever has an opinion. My wife has an opinion about everything. She simply refuses to spend one on people who are not listening. Last month, I put something in her envelope that was not money. A note. 4 words, in terrible handwriting, in her language. She has never mentioned it, and she has not thrown it away, and it is still in there. And yes, I check. I am aware of what I have become. I am at peace with it. So tell me honestly, would you hand your whole salary to your husband or your wife on the first of the month? I would. I do. It is the least stressful thing in my life, and most of the people typing no are describing their trust issues and calling it independence. Change my mind. Next time, an Italian family, where every meal is an argument, everybody wins, and the one unforgivable thing is turning down a second plate.